started. So thank you everyone for joining this evening. This is part 2 or the second in the series of kind of geared towards if you're just starting out with card making, but it's also a really good refresher for those folks who maybe are just getting back into it after some time. And today what I wanted to talk about was how you can use layers in your card to add both depth and interest. And the card we're going to be making tonight is this one here. And it's really a very simple card to make, but it does give us the opportunity to use not just one layer, but 2. And we'll also get to use the blends to do a little bit of coloring. Materials that we're going to use, I've already got my card base. It's my standard 4 1/4 by 11 that I have scored and folded at 5 1/2. So it gives us a nice card base. I made that ahead of time. I have a piece of Whisper White that we're going to use for our focal point. This measures 2 3/4 by 4 inches. And then I have a piece of Dapper Denim, and we're going to map this right behind the focal panel so that it gives it some added interest. It really makes it stand off the page. And that is cut to 3 inches by 4 1/4. And if I hold these up together, what you'll see is it's cut just 1/4 of an inch shorter, wider and longer. We also have a mat, and I'm just going to pull it up here. We also have a mat of our designer series paper. And this is from our Delightful Daisy collection that was introduced last summer. And I absolutely love this designer series paper, and I thought it went really well with my color scheme. Now the mat you see on the card, I have cut to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. But one of the things I wanted to show you was you don't have to use these exact measurements. What you can do is you can cut your mat to be a slightly different size. And I went ahead and did just that. So while the mat I use for the card here is 3 3/4 by 5, I have another mat that I've cut that is slightly smaller. It is 3 inches by 4 3/4 inches. And I want to show you the difference. So it's still the same size focal panel, still the same colored cardstock, but with a smaller mat, and I'll pull my card base over to give you a really good idea. What you'll see is you actually see more of the card base this way. So if you really just wanted a hint of your designer series paper to frame it, but not to be as strong on your card, then cut your mat a little bit smaller than that. A good rule of thumb, and what's easiest for me, is to measure in 1/4 inches. 1/4 inches will usually give me a narrow border. So if I wanted a wider border like here, I would go up to 1/2 inch. Or perhaps I'd go up to 3/4 of an inch, just depending on the size of my focal panel. So that just gives you some options. The easiest way I've found to determine what feels right for you, just cut some pieces of paper and lay them out. And you'll soon find what is most comfortable or most appealing to your eye, because it's different for everyone. All right, I'm going to go ahead and we'll start making the card now. So I'm going to pull this card aside. And we're going to work with our focal panel first. So So I'll put all the other layers away. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and stamp our images. And I stamped my images in black ink. And for that, I'm using Memento black ink. So let me just pull that up here. It's a really good black ink if you're going to be doing any kind of coloring with alcohol markers. It even works well for coloring with colored pencils. I'm not sure I would use it with watercolors because you could experience some running of the black ink. So try to remember that it's Memento black ink is good for using with your alcohol markers. And if you did want to do watercoloring, then you would want to go ahead and use, we have archival black ink that would work well for that. So just remember opposites. Your alcohol ink works with watercolors. Your water-based ink works with alcohol markers. Does that make sense? All right. Now the images, and I've gone ahead and mounted my images. I have one main image. Let me pull that up and see if you can see it better, which is a lovely lady walking, carrying an umbrella. And the sentiment that really seemed to go well with that image for me was, wishing you brighter days to come. So those are the two that I've chosen. And they're from our Beautiful You stamp set. And this was one of the first stamp sets I got last year when I joined because I just fell in love with the images. And it's a 2-set stamp set. So you've got this one that has the lady with the umbrella and the very fashionable lady in the hat. And then you also have another one of my favorites, the person who's dancing, and all of these wonderful sentiments. But you can use any image or any stamp that appeals to you. Just bear in mind that you do want to coordinate your colors if you're going to be using a colored card base like I am and designer series paper. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and ink up my image here. I want to make sure, and I apologize if that shakes the table a little bit. And I'm just looking to make sure that I have enough ink, and I'm happy with that. Now this is going to be a little challenging because the camera is right in the way, but I'm going to go ahead and lining it up so that it's as straight as possible. And I want to make sure the image is in the lower right-hand side. That's going to give me plenty of room for my sentiment. Just like we talked about last week, you're going to press the stamp down and hold gentle pressure for just a few minutes to make sure the ink transfers. And there's our image. Now I'm going to go ahead and ink up the sentiment. Make sure I have it right side up. Can't tell you how many times I've stamped it upside down. Get ink all over my fingers. And again, I'm going to stamp this. I'm going to pull this down a little bit so I can see. I think you guys can still see that. And lining it up as best I can. I'm again going to press straight down, hold gentle pressure for just a couple of seconds, and lift up. Not too bad. I'm pretty happy with that. Even with the camera in the way, I managed to do it pretty straight. All right, let me close up my ink, put it away, because now comes the fun part. We get to go ahead and do some coloring. And as I mentioned, we're going to be using our stamping blends. I absolutely love the blends. They're just so easy to work with. They blend like a butter. And the colors that we're going to be using today are our Pool Party Dark, our pool party light. And then we're going to be using our Calypso Coral light and our Calypso Coral dark. And then for the shading, I just pulled in our light smoky slate. And the coloring for this is really quick, so I'm just going to go ahead and I start with my lighter color and quickly lay down a base of color. And I'm using the brush end. This has both a brush end and a nib end. But this is a fairly large area, so I'm pretty comfortable using my brush end. Now I laid down that base color all over because now I'm going to go back and I'm going to use the brush end again. This is my dark pool party and I want to just throw in my highlights. So anywhere there might be folds, I'm going to bring that in and just put a few in. Now to blend it, I'm going to pull out my light pool party, and this time I'm going to use the nub end. I get a little bit more control with it because to blend, I'm simply going to go over the edges of the area that I put the darker pool party on and just do little circles to go ahead and fill that in. So really very simple. For the dress, we're going to use the same technique. I'm going to start with my light Calypso Coral. I've got the brush end. Just going to dab it on, making sure I'm not going outside the lines, although I kind of like it when it looks a little bit watercolored, and as you know, watercolors definitely go outside the lines. All right, so I've got that done. Now I'm going to go ahead in with my dark. This time I'm going to use my nib for the dark because I have some finer lines here. So I just want to throw in some shadows. You don't have to be exact about it. Just wherever you think there would be darker colors. And just scribble them on there. You don't have to be too neat. And then I'm going to do her shoes or her rain boots in the same dark color. I'm going to put just a little bit more over here. And now I'm going to blend it out, going back to my lighter shade of Calypso Coral and just doing some little circles, making sure that I'm blending the areas without getting rid of all of the different highlights. All right. And where I want a little more of the light color, but not darker, so you can almost create a third color just by going back over with that light color, and it will give you a gradient shade. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that. I did forget one thing. I want to color in her legs. So I'm going to go ahead and use our ivory marker, which works really well for skin tones. So just the back of her neck that's visible and the legs. And I'm not going to worry about doing any shading on those. They're pretty small areas. And that's it for coloring in the umbrella and the dress. The last thing I did was to take my light smoky slate and I want to give it a shadow. So I'm going to bring in the card. And what you'll notice is to ground it so it didn't look like she was floating in the air, I put the smoky slate to the left side. I also used some of the pool party down below to kind of make it look like she's splashing in a puddle. And there's really no art to this. All you have to do is just scribble in some basic lines just around. And I think we're good with that. Oh my goodness, I got ink all over my paper. Occupational hazard. And then I'm going to come back with my light pool party. And I don't have as much of a puddle this time, but I certainly can drop in a little bit of water. And if I want to darken that up, I'm just going to go back to my dark pool party and run that right over it. All right, so that's it for our coloring. Now I want to see if I can get rid of that nasty ink smudge. So I have one of these sand and rubber erasers. Very, very handy for taking off smudges. If you have inky fingers like I do, this thing can save your life. And you don't want to use a hard pressure. You just want to continuously go back and forth with the darker gray part. As you can see, that's going to get rid of a lot of the ink. All right. Now, if we go back and look at our focal panel, there was one other thing I did here. See these tiny little raindrops? Well, those are part of our epoxy shapes, and they come in clear. I'll just bring them out here for you. And they have these tiny little raindrops, and I'm just going to pull the sleeve out so that that glare doesn't prohibit you from seeing it. But where's my dapper denim? You'll be able to see it really well against that. You see those raindrops up there? But they're clear, so they really wouldn't show up very well just putting them on the card like that. Well, this is where our blends come in handy, because I can go ahead and take either my light pool party or my dark pool party, whichever one I want, and I can color in the raindrops. So I'm just going to go over it, and oops, I want to use my brush marker so I get lots of ink on there. And it's really not going to show up a lot at first, but as it dries, you'll be able to see it more and more. So I'm just going to go ahead and give that a good brush. And if I hold that up, I think you'll be able to see, well, maybe not against that, but it's a slightly different color. So it added just a little tinge of the blue. I did 3 of them because 3 is pleasing to the eye. Odd numbers always seem to draw your eye in. And I'm just going to lift this up and decide where I want them. So I'm going to put 1 there. I think you can really see the blue now. So as it dries, it gets a little bit darker. And then I think I'm going to put 1 right over here. Oops, if I can get it to come off my finger. Well, fiddle. Try not to cut myself while I'm doing this. Ah! Yes, they will tend to get away from you. Lori's sitting there saying, why didn't you just use your pokey tool? Well, on these little bitty ones, the pokey tool doesn't always work well because it has a rounded end to it. So let's just go ahead and pull up this other one. I'm going to put it down here. And not only am I doing it in 3s, I'm trying to work in kind of a triangular shape. So I'll put 1 over here. And now we have our focal panel done. So in not much time, we were able to come up with something I think that looks really nice. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this onto my Dapper Denim mat. And by doing that, it really helps the blues look even bluer. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that with some multimedia liquid glue. Because when you're working with a small mat, a small border of mat, I need that extra wiggle room. So I'm just going to go ahead and smush on a bunch of glue here. Not going too close to the edges because I do want to be able to wiggle it. And then I'm going to gently lay it down, lining it up. And then I found it easiest to pick it up and look at it. I'm a little bit crooked, but luckily I have that wiggle room. So there's our first mat. Now if you wanted to, You wanted something very simple, you certainly could lay it right on your card base like that. But as I mentioned, I want to go ahead and mat it. So I've got my designer series paper, and like I said, I just think that the colors went really well. I also love this side, but a little bit too bright. So I'm going to glue the mat straight down to the card base, and I'm going to pop this part up. That's where our depth comes in. So let me just add some glue on this. And make sure your card opens right. And I'm going to lay this down and just wiggle it around a little bit until I have it where I want. Okay. Put my liquid glue away, because now we're ready to go ahead and pop this bad boy up. I'm going to use our Stampin' Dimensionals for this. They have just enough thickness to them that it will help you be able to see the depth in it. It'll cast a little bit of a shadow on our DSP when the light hits it. So I'm going to do all four corners. And then I don't want my center to mush in, so I'm going to do a couple there. All right. Squish them down so that they're easier to peel the back off of. And just peel the backings off. And I'll probably end up with one of two of these backings ending up on my dog Winnie, because they end up on the floor and she thinks that they're comfortable to sleep in for some reason. All right. Now I'm going to center this as best I can. Although I know a lot of people who like to kilter their focal panels, and that gives added interest as well. But I think I'm going to go ahead and simply... And I want to show you a little tip. Because I'm not ready to press it down yet, I'm holding it so that my fingers actually touch the card rather than the dimensionals. And that allows me to try and center it. And then when I'm ready, I'm just going to gently put it down. I'm happy with that, so I'll go ahead and press. And there we have our card. Easy breezy, simple. All right, what questions do you have about how to layer your cards, either using mats of designer series paper or just mats of colored cardstock? And I hope you guys are still seeing me, because my video on my tablet quit playing, so I'm assuming that this is still going. Just take a quick look. Yep, looks like we're still going. All right. Well, if there aren't any questions, I'll go ahead and close out the video. If you do have any questions, leave me a comment. Even if it's after the live feed, I see those and I'll be happy to respond to them. I'll have this posted up on my blog and hopefully out on YouTube if the quality is good enough tomorrow. Thanks everybody for joining me. And if any of you need supplies, please be sure to visit me at cardsbywinnie.wordpress.com. and you can go ahead and purchase all of your supplies there. Have a great night, everybody, and if you're going to join us on Saturday, that'll be at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our next beginner series episode will be next Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. Good night, everybody.